From Madrid, what we are seeing is another step in the escalation of the conflict, because the government announced this morning the activation of Article 155 of the Constitution in the Spanish Parliament, which allows Madrid to suspend the self-government of Catalonia. So, Mariano Rajoy's government maintains the same position. This morning, the Catalan president Carles Puigdemont recognized for the first time that the independence of Catalonia wasn't formally declared on October 9th, because the decision wasn't voted on by Parliament. However, at the same time, Puigdemont reserved the right to do that, to declare Catalonia's independence on a date yet to be decided. If Mariano Rajoy's government, and I quote, persists in impeding dialogue and the repression continues, there's no doubt that the crisis has got worse. The Spanish stock market is going down, and so are the European ones, as a consequence of the situation. So all of this is going to continue for a while. We can now confirm what are going to be the next steps. This Saturday there will be an extraordinary session of the Ministerial Council to activate formally Article 155. Then we will know exactly which measures will be taken. Next week, here in Madrid, a report will be sent to the Senate, where they'll set up a commission to study these measures before the debate. And the voting on all of this will probably take place at the end of the month. So we have to follow the situation very closely. Back to you, Soyin.
Vincent Montagut in Madrid. U.S. President Donald Trump has hosted Puerto Rican Governor Ricardo Rosselló during his visit to the United States. The island's governor is in the U.S. hoping to force the federal government to provide disaster relief to Puerto Rico weeks after Hurricane Maria hit. Last week, the United States House of Representatives passed a $36.5 billion aid package for Puerto Rico and other territories hit by natural disasters. The Senate is expected to consider the measure. Roughly 80% of the island is still without electricity, while 30% of the population still does not have access to clean water. Our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Gestoso, has more information.
Two things very important from that meeting between Governor Rosselló and President Trump. Governor Rosselló insisted in two messages, very clear. We need equal treatment, all the resources that we can get. And the other message was, we need to recognize that there's a lot of work to do. That means that there's an incredible discrepancy between the picture that President Trump is trying to paint. The only thing that President Trump, 1 month after the passage of Hurricane Maria, is stressing is the, according to him, quote unquote, the fantastic, use words like fantastic, job that FEMA is doing in Puerto Rico, when the reality is almost the opposite. And most definitely, Puerto Ricans, as you know, they are U.S. citizens. 3.5 million U.S. citizens are being treated differently from the citizens who live here in mainland, according to Congressman Luis Gutierrez. We have the opportunity to interview Congressman Gutierrez precisely from a program with Telesur, and he insists that this is chaos. This is a humanitarian crisis that doesn't get better with the passage of the weeks. We're talking 85% of the island without electricity. Most of the people do not have water, and it have contaminated water in the regions, mostly mountainous regions. No hospitals, no medical care because of the lack of electricity. And the most vociferous complaint about what's going on in Puerto Rico is not coming from the governor Rosselló, that looks, according to Congressman Luis Gutierrez, very mild, very much politically correct, but by the mayor of San Juan, who has said very, very clearly, we are dying here. You guys are killing us here. We need your help. I'm begging from your help, she was saying. And she also was saying that it was so despicable, the words and the treatment that President Trump was doing regarding the situation of Puerto Rico, that she called President Trump the hater-in-chief regarding this, definitely this awful disaster. The situation is not getting better. Most definitely, what is being denounced by Congressman Luis Gutierrez is the aid of the U.S. is not effective, it's not using the same terms. So bottom line, there's a clear example of discrimination against Puerto Ricans, against Latins, about what is considered, according to the Congressman Gutierrez, in the mind of the President Trump, a colony, and is treating Puerto Rico as a colony, and Puerto Ricans are dying and are suffering even 1 month after the passage of Hurricane Maria.
Thank you so much for that update, Jorge Gestoso. This week in the Dominican Republic, the medical services in all of the hospitals went on a general strike for 72 hours. It's the third time that the doctors went on strike to demand compliance to their pay adjustments. The conflict continues while both parties involved, the medical personnel and the National Health Service, are refuting each other. On Tuesday, the Vice President, Margarita Cedeno, urged the doctors to provide medical services to the people, especially to children. Today marks 34 years since the assassination of Maurice Bishop. He led the Grenadian Revolution in 1979, but was murdered after a split within his own party, the New Jewel Movement. The US President Ronald Reagan immediately invaded Grenada and destroyed the revolution. Let's take a closer look at the Grenadian Revolution on our website.
Because the people of Grenada and the leadership of Grenada speaks English and therefore can communicate directly to the people of the United States.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. Venezuela's 18 new elected socialist governors have been heading back to their states after they were sworn in by the Constituent Assembly on Wednesday. But the 5 opposition governors have had a more difficult time as their parties are divided over whether or not to recognize the election results. Details in this report.
The voting records show that in 2 years, the Venezuelan opposition lost over 3 million votes.
In this moment, we don't recognize any of the results.
Given this defeat, the opposition bloc used its old card of denouncing fraud, with no proof. It's only recognized the validity of the results in the 5 states where it won, and where its elected governors rushed to receive their credentials from the National Electoral Council.
Dentro de sus partidos hay unas presiones en un sentido, otros en otro.
But the already fragile opposition coalition couldn't cope with the defeat. The "let's come together to denounce fraud" script started to fall apart. There was no fraud, said opposition leader Enrique Ochoa on Twitter, and the Acción Democrática party, which won 4 of the 5 opposition governorships, said the same. These are the numbers so far, and it would be irresponsible to call it fraud, said the party. Candidates and prominent figures from the opposition distanced themselves from the idea of fraud and started to blame the opposition leadership for the electoral defeat.
The leadership has to accept that it didn't work well, and in any serious, civilized country, when a leadership doesn't reach its goal, it steps aside. There will be other Venezuelans who will know how to lead the people to the victory they deserve. This is the only country where an opposition got it wrong when it sought insurrection, got it wrong when it went to elections, and instead of saying it was their mistake, they said the strategy was wrong. We're good, but the strategy was wrong, for the love of God.
The one who's still not accepting the results is the far-right party, Voluntad Popular, which after not winning one governorship, now says there were irregularities in the electoral process.
The
audit we're asking for is not to compare the content of the boxes with the records. That would be stupid. We won't go there. A complete audit should be done of all the process.
But their followers rebel. After the promise of more protests with no results and over 100 deaths, the opposition coalition didn't want their candidates to run under a system they called a trick and go to vote under what they called a dictatorship. Campaigns were the reason for such a high rate of abstention and the endless insult on social media. "Oh, now the protest is voting. It is a pity that I got the message late," one tweet said. And in another one, "The opposition didn't vote. It won't vote for you, genocidal negotiators."
People, the protests in Venezuela must grow now to make the leaders of the MUD coalition leave, to allow a new structure to lead the country to a way out. What should be done now must be in the direction of removing the MUD leadership.
is how did he die and when. We'll bring you all the information about the forensic examination process that will last between 24 and 36 hours. And finally, it's important to highlight that the family is still demanding respect for the process and for this issue not to be used in a political way in the context of the upcoming elections. We go back now to the studios.
With that much needed report. And after this body was found in the Chubut River in southern Argentina, major parties running on Saturday's midterm congressional election in Argentina suspended their campaigns on Wednesday. In the final week of campaigning, the Maldonado case has overshadowed the congressional election. 31.1 million Argentine voters will go to the polls to elect a third of the Senate and half of the House of Representatives. Prominent candidates include the former president, Cristina Fernandez, leader of the Citizen Unity Coalition, and the conservative candidate for the current governing party, Cambiemos, Esteban Bullrich. The police in Haiti have been clashing with around 1,000 protesters who are demanding the government resign and revoke the bill approving next year's budget. Labor unions and Haitian political parties have been protesting against the budget for months, arguing that it will affect the most underprivileged of the country. This week, demonstrators tried to march from an upper-class district of Pétionville to the center of the capital, Port-au-Prince, but officers stopped them halfway with tear gas and water cannons. A Chilean judge has sentenced 35 agents from the former dictator's Augusto Pinochet's repressive forces. They were accused of the disappearance of a 29-year-old woman who was 5 months pregnant at the time of her arrest in December 1976. The victim, Reinalda Pereira Plaza, was a medical technician and a member of the Communist Party of Chile. During the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet, according to official data, some 3,200 Chileans died at the hands of state agents, of whom 1,192 are still recorded as disappeared detainees. 9 cases correspond to pregnant women. A Brazilian congressional committee has voted 39 to 26 to reject charges against Brazil's unelected President Michel Temer, stemming from a corruption case involving the world's largest meat packer. He had been accused of taking bribes and condoning the payment of hush money to a jailed politician in testimony by businessman Josley Batista. The full lower house of Congress must still vote on the charges, but is expected to shelve them next week, sparing Temer from trial by the Supreme Court for alleged obstruction of justice and membership in a criminal organization. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. We start with news from China's biggest political event, the Congress of the Communist Party, which has completed its second day. Our correspondent, Isiara Diaz, has the details from Beijing.
Sí, gracias colega, un abrazo para ti, saludos también para todas las personas que se informan con nosotros a esta hora a través de la señal informativa.
Today, the second session of the Chinese Communist Party Congress ended in the People's Palace, in the political heart of the capital, Beijing. More than 2,000 delegates are discussing the economic and social changes that the country has been living through in the last 5 years, and at the same time planning the next 5 years in social and economic strategy. One of the most important tasks is the designation of more than 200 members of the Central Committee, and among them, 24 delegates will be elected for the Political Bureau. And after this, the 7 members of the Permanent Committee will be designated, which is part of the core of the Chinese government. They hope Xi Jinping's image will be further strengthened after this Congress. Remember that the President is also the Secretary General of the Chinese Communist Party. And to have an idea of this political organization founded in 1921, they have named as central leaders of the state just a few important historic personalities like Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, and Xi Jinping. Most of the sessions are behind closed doors. Some delegates have given interviews to the press about the Congress, talking about their experiences and how proud they are to participate in these sessions. Most of them coincide also on the fact that they must work together to achieve a modern socialist country until the middle of the 21st century, agreeing with President Xi Jinping's opening speech. Also, some other ideas are present, like the exchanges among provincial delegations to the Congress, amendments to the Constitution, the fight against pollution, and 3 special topics that are recurrent in these sessions. The first is the importance of the anti-corruption campaign that has targeted both top and middle-level leaders. Hence, the commitment to strengthen the campaign promoted by President Xi Jinping is reaffirmed. In second place, the goal to eradicate rural poverty by 2020. It is known that more than 60 million people in the latest 5 years have overcome poverty thanks to the government's efforts. And in third place is the fact that China is looking to be a more open, dynamic and inclusive economy, which has to do with the economic globalization that the country has been defending internationally, and also with the Silk Road Initiative that proposes an economic and commercial connection between several countries from Asia, Africa and Europe, mainly around the old Silk Road. Additionally, there are important data like the rise of the country's GDP from 54 million yuan to 80 million yuan in the last 5 years. This data and more information is being analyzed here in the National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party.
Por ejemplo, en los últimos 5 años sabemos que el PIB de China ha aumentado desde.
That report from Isiara Diaz in Beijing. Now here's a look at some of the other news making headlines around the world.
Blast in the southern city of Kandahar has left dozens dead. The attack, which was launched on an Afghan military training camp, is believed to have killed around 58 soldiers, although exact numbers are still being verified. The Afghan National Army have set up various checkpoints around the city in response to the attack. The attack comes after dozens were killed earlier this week in the eastern city of Gardez when Taliban fighters targeted a police training centre. Residents of the war-torn city of Marari began clearing debris after its recent liberation by government forces. President Rodrigo Duterte declared the city liberated on Tuesday after his forces defeated the Islamic State group who had taken up positions in the city back in May of this year. The victory brings an end to one of the longest-running urban battles in the country's history. More than 1,000 people have been killed in the battle, most of which were Islamic State fighters. However, an estimated 180,000 civilians were evacuated, and a further 84,760 have been displaced by the conflict. A fire has ripped through an iconic luxury hotel in Yangon. So far, one person has been confirmed dead and others have been left injured. Dramatic scenes were filmed overnight as hundreds of firefighters battled the blaze and helped 140 guests who were later evacuated to safety. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Mogadishu to rally against the Al-Shabaab group, who were behind the recent bomb blast that killed over 300 people. The president of Somalia, Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, addressed the demonstration and called for people to take up arms against the group.
Al-Shabaab, they killed 10 people at first, then 100, and now they killed more than 300. They attacked hotels, restaurants, universities, and other public places. As a president, I will be the first person to pick up a gun and go to the front line to fight Al-Shabaab. Whoever is ready, come with me.
We've come to the end of this midday news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusurtv.net/English. But you can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. To Tell Us Your English, I'm Sweeney Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
I'm sitting here today in a very unique building, the only one of its kind in the whole of the United Kingdom. And it's the Museum of Immigration in London's East End, an area where refugees have been coming for many centuries. And the interesting thing about this building is that it initially was a Huguenot house of the Georgian period, where Huguenot refugees who came from France in the 17th century were given refuge in this area. So it's not an accident that we're filming here, because the subject I want to discuss today with Professor Bridget Anderson, Professor of Citizenship at Oxford University, is the whole question of immigration. Why this has become such a poisonous issue in European politics today, why it still torments many people in the United States of America. Bridget, welcome.
Thank you.
It could be said that the entire history